This is WCM's Park Update, a weekly show covering the outdoor hospitality industry, hosted by Ben Quiggle and Mike Gast. During each episode, you'll hear from special guests and campground experts on topics that will help your park flourish. WCM's Park Update is a production of Woodall's Campground Magazine.
Hi, welcome to WCM's Park Update. I'm Ben Quiggle, editor of Woodall's Campground Magazine, and this episode is sponsored by New Book. And for you guys who don't know what New Book is, it's a reservation software platform. There's a lot of campgrounds, RV parks that utilize the New Book system. We're very excited to have them on as a sponsor. So thank you, New Book. And my colleague, Mike Gast, is here. Former Vice President of Communications at Campgrounds of America. And our guest today is Nick Purslow, Managing Director of Glampitect. And you probably have a number of different titles, right, Nick? Or you work with a number of different companies. So explain what you're doing.
As of recently, yeah. So thank you, Ben and Mike, for having me on. Really appreciate it. I've been the managing director of Glampitect North America, which is Glampitect's US and Canadian branch for just over a year now. And so that business aims to guide people through the process of starting a glamping business, but with a particular focus on due diligence when it comes to zoning and permitting. But we can also help with a variety of things like feasibility studies, site designs, permit applications, etc. In the last few months, I've added a few more titles. Glampitect North America is actually, I don't know if I've ever sort of mentioned this publicly, but it's actually in the process of being acquired. Nothing is signed yet, but that is the plan. Hopefully and it's being acquired by a startup in the space that is currently in the search for capital. So if anyone has loads of money that they want to chuck at us, feel free to send me a message. I won't go into too much detail about that startup, but essentially we'll be sort of looking to do revenue shares across North America. And that startup is going to be using glamping structures from EJH Distribution, which is a company that distributes for two different European manufacturers in the glamping space. And so with all that in mind, and we're all sort of coming together, I'm also now a business development manager for EJH Distribution. So if you want any really cool, unique glamping structures, then feel free to shoot me a message as well.
Okay, Nick. First question is, Nick, how's business in North America? You've been here for a year now. What's going on?
It's really exciting. So I got into the glamping industry in the UK back in 2020, and I worked in that industry for 18 months before making the leap to North America. And there's a few differences in those markets. I would say. It's been glamping's kind of been established for longer in the UK, but there's a little less variation in the types of glamping sites, maybe because the weather is basically the same everywhere across the UK, whereas obviously in the US and Canada it varies a lot more. So I think the US market in particular is really exciting. There's a whole lot going on, both in terms of the mom and pop operators, the ones who maybe have a small patch of land and want to make money for them, and maybe want to put a few like bell tents or safari tents on there, all the way up to the big branded operators like AutoCamp, Getaway, Under Canvas, etc. And that's something that you don't see in the UK. There's no real venture funded big glamping brands in the UK at all, really. So it's really exciting to see the sort of divergence of business types in the US. And I think we're only at the very beginning. It's still pretty niche industry, glamping. I still have to explain what it is to a lot of people, particularly like planning departments, which is a bit annoying sometimes. So I think we're only at the very beginning. I think there is venture money behind those bigger brands, as I say, but I think there's a whole lot more to come, and I think we're going to see a lot more brands emerging, which is kind of why I want to get into that revenue share space as well. Really exciting place to be. Lots going on. We're getting lots of calls, all sorts. So I think we're only at the very beginning.
So explain the revenue share part a little bit, Nick. Is it your company owning the structures themselves and revenue sharing with the landowner?
Yeah, so we're not sort of disclosing too many details publicly just yet, because it is quite early days, and we are in the search for capital. Obviously, if anyone is interested in hearing more and they are interested in investing, then we'll happily share our decks and everything like that. But yeah, the idea is, we would look to partner with existing landowners, supply them with glamping units, a whole sort of operational marketing and tech support stack. And then split the revenue. So they would be the owner of the business. We would essentially be kind of like a half service provider, half partner, but working very closely with them. And we'd be, looking at like a 20-year contract where we'd sort of help them sort of set up and maintain their glamping business throughout that period.
I think one of the things that's really cool with what you have done, well, for one, Nick, you do a pretty popular podcast, although probably not as popular as this one, on a regular basis. So, but you guys also have a lot of resources on your website, glampitect.com/US for Glampitect North America. And you have buying guides for structures. You also do different things on how to start a glamping business, zoning. You have a blog. I guess, are you guys seeing a lot of traction to your website? Are you seeing a lot of people looking for stuff like that really just want to dive into this kind of, really read up on everything as they get their business going?
Yeah, so I mean that was the whole strategy from the start, really. So I learned a lot about marketing when I first joined Glampitect UK. As I say, back in 2020, and it's kind of copying that playbook, really. They were working with an agency at the time who, and we're sort of implementing a blog first strategy where the idea is that you write blogs that rank well for particular keywords. So, there may be, I think, at the minute there's like 120 or 150 people per month in the US, or maybe in the UK. I might be getting my countries mixed up, but let's say there's 150 people per month in one particular country searching the term how to start a glamping business. We would write a big guide on that, which we hope is really, really valuable. And it would sort of aim to capture those keywords so that when people search how to start a glamping business, that blog gets to the top of Google. And then, once they're on that blog, there may be a few downloadable guides that they can download. And then that's a lead in our system so that we can, if we want to call them or email them or keep them up to date with what we're doing. And they also, are on our mailing list. So they're in touch with us and they can reach out if they want help with their glamping business. So that blog strategy has been, a big part of our marketing strategy, really. It's been neglected a little bit in recent months just because there's been so much obviously on my plate, but yeah, that and then the podcast, which is somehow seems to bring in a decent amount of leads as well, and some really interesting leads as well. Some people that are far more successful than I could ever hope to be seem to somehow be excited to work with me because of the podcast, which baffles me, to be honest. But yeah, that seems to work as a lead generating tool as well.
Are you still finding, is there still a lot of interest in developing and creating glamping parks? Has that started to wane due to the economy at all, or are people still finding the funding and really excited about starting these projects?
So I mean, I think there's two distinct points there. I think the first point is people absolutely are continuing to want to develop glamping sites, glamping resorts, whatever sort of term you want to use. We've seen sort of again, our marketing has dropped off a little bit in recent months because of everything going on my end, but absolutely we've seen no sort of real change in number of people expressing an interest, people searching for those like glamping related search terms, people listening to the podcast. Our sort of viewership, listenership is increasing. So no difference in intention. Money, obviously the interest rates and everything like that sort of are making it a little bit harder to attract sort of or get decent terms on loans. I know there's one big operator in particular, one big branded operator that have sort of basically put a halt to all new developments just because of the economy. That doesn't mean they're going to stop forever, but they've put a pause on it. So yeah, I mean, I think it probably makes development harder, but certainly in terms of interest, we've seen no real change.
So what have you learned about North America glamping as far as the design of a park goes? Is it a lot different than what you saw in Great Britain?
Yes, and I think that's probably because of the geography of it. So I think the average Glampitect UK client has far fewer acres than the average Glampitect North America client, and that's just because there's more land in the US, obviously, and Canada. I think there's this may be stereotyping, but I think generally everything in the US is bigger anyway than the UK, and so obviously that will in the UK because Glampitect UK does kind of like in-house design with in-house architects, and a lot of the time we're trying to figure out there's really not much space to work with, so how do we sort of maximize the number of units whilst sort of maintaining privacy. Have we lost Mike? Or should I just carry on?
Nope, we're good.
Okay.
He'll come back.
Yeah. And so it's a case of trying to fit in, maximize units while it's also sort of maximizing privacy as well. In the US, that's less of an issue just because there's generally each client has more land, and I think that leads to nicer resorts. To be honest with you, there's always generally more privacy. The views are generally better. The weather is generally better, although in winter, I'm about to experience my first Edmington winter, so I'm really looking forward to that.
You're gonna have a lot, and you're gonna have a lot of more snow in Edmonton, I think.
Yeah, maybe. So I've been told. Yeah.
So like in the UK, do they normally do glamping or camping all year round, or is that something that is more seasonal?
No, I would actually say the UK glamping market is less seasonal than the US. And I think the main reason really is because the most common type of structure in the UK, or the two most common type of structures in the UK are shepherd huts and glamping pods. So shepherd huts are like the traditional. I mean, I don't know how you describe them. I don't know whether people on this side of the Atlantic know what a shepherd hut is, but it's like a thin hut traditionally used by shepherds, essentially, and they're generally smaller and more for couples. But again, wooden or sometimes like steel, and a year-round unit. And then the other really popular unit that is rapidly becoming the most popular unit is the glamping pod, which it looks like a kind of upturned boat, upturned like U-shape, and again that's generally a timber product year-round. Whereas in the US, I think and I think, by the way, that's probably because the weather is less reliable in the UK, and even in the summer it can be like 10 degrees C. So I suppose it sort of insures you a little bit. Whereas in the US, there's a lot more safari tents, bell tents, yurts, etc., which kind of necessitate a seasonal business. So I've always think maybe I've been biased from my sort of UK education, but my plan is to always my plan when we start these revenue share businesses is to do it year round and use year round structures, just because I think it's silly to sort of just to miss out on all that business when there is a market for winter glamping. So I think maybe that will sort of change and it'll become more year round as the market develops.
Yeah, so we do some on winter camping, and there are parks that have viewed that. Obviously it's a zoning thing to some degree. Some areas just don't allow winter camping. Is that something that you think campers are going to demand more of, like where they're going to want more of the winter glamping? Obviously RVing to some degree is a little difficult when it gets really icy.
I mean when it's like icy, and obviously the occupancy rates will always drop in the winter compared to summer. Like that's just natural. But I certainly think that there's a market for it. I mean, I think people out there are already proving that there's a market for it. There's plenty of successful year-round sites, including some of the big branded operators as well. So yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I think the average camper is maybe a slightly different customer to the average glamper. And so, I don't know whether there'd be any sort of discrepancy there, but certainly on the glamping side of things, there definitely is a market in the right places for year-round glamping, absolutely.
So you've got a website that has a spot that talks about the journey from finding land, kind of from the end to end, the planning, the feasibility studies. I'm sure that when customers find you, they may be at various points along already. My question is, what's the biggest mistake that glamping operators are making by the time you get a hold of them?
I would say, and we're doing our best to sort of educate people on this and minimize this, and I hope we're doing a reasonable job of it. But I would say a lot of people just don't take zoning and permitting seriously enough, and they may spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on a property, and only to find out that they can't do what they actually want to do on the property. So we spent, if you look at a lot of our blogs and podcasts, a lot of it is make sure you check your zoning before you do anything, just because you don't want to waste your time or money on a project that's never going to happen. And that applies to, people may own an existing property and start developing it and get into trouble later down the line, or it could apply to someone who's looking for a property and is just thinking, okay, where's a really nice location? Where's there going to be loads of demand? And let's look at this property this week. Let's look at that property next week. And don't stop to consider zoning. So what we always endorse is what we call the zoning-led approach, where instead of going from property to property, we would always say, okay, let's say you're looking at in an area that encompasses 5 different counties. Check out the zoning of each of those counties first, figure out whether you're able to, or you're never going to be able to know for sure until you put a permit application in, but you can certainly mitigate a lot of risk by doing that basic research, reading the zoning code, and figuring out A, whether you're allowed to do a glamping project in any of those counties, and B, figuring out which zoning district you're allowed to do glamping in. And then if you do that basic research, you can then say, okay, we might forget about these 2 counties. We're going to target these 3 counties, and we're only going to be looking in these zoning districts within these counties. And that would just save you a whole lot of time, be a lot more efficient, and potentially save you a whole lot of money by preventing you from sort of diving headfirst into something that isn't going to be feasible in the long run.
So we're a few years into glamping now. Is the glamping guest evolving as to what they're demanding or wanting out of a glamping experience?
Yes, I would say, maybe I would say the first sort of glamping site in the US first well-known glamping site in the US was the first under canvas site in 2009, and I was 9 years old then, so I can't really comment on what the industry was like then. But I would say, I know, for example, that ensuite bathrooms and are becoming more important, and I think for example in the UK it's just expected that there's ensuite bathrooms. I would say there's a slightly less of an expectation that that's the case here now, but that I think that will only change as the standards get set, and yeah, I think taste will be sort of upgrading as time goes on. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we have to take a short break, and we'll be right back. We need to recognize our sponsor, New Book, and we'll be right back with Nick. Calling all campground operators, owners, front desk heroes, and more. Say hello to your show sponsor, New Book, your connected hospitality management solution, packed with the power to streamline your operations, maximize revenue, increase bookings, and deliver memorable guest experiences thanks to its suite of innovative and easy-to-use tools, backed by an expert customer support team cheering you on 24/7. So if you're ready to level up your campground and unlock more opportunities, head to newbook.cloud to start your journey today. Hi, welcome back to WCM's Park Update, and we are talking with Nick Purslow from Glampitect, and just about glamping, I guess, and some of the differences between the UK and what you see here and the market moving forward. I guess, as I look at the glamping market, it's kind of interesting. Even the glamping market's kind of segmenting itself now. Under Canvas has like a new brand they just came out with that's supposed to be like super luxury versus maybe some of the other Under Canvas parks. Do you see more segmentation like that coming down the road for the glamping industry too, where you're going to have these like ultra luxury glamping destinations, and then you're going to have kind of the lower end glamping? There's going to be a a huge stretch there?
Yeah. So to answer your question, yeah, I think there absolutely will be more segmentation. As I say, there's been some sort of venture funded brands in the space already, and I think there's only going to be more money piling into the space as time goes on, as investors, whether that's VC firms, whether that's hotel groups, whatever it may be, are starting to realise just how good the returns can be. It's not uncommon for a glamping site to return its investment in 2 or 3 years, which I think is pretty much unheard of in most real estate. So I absolutely think the more money that comes in, the more sort of distinct brands will be created and the more innovation there's going to be. And that under canvas sort of sub brand or sister brand, whatever you want to call it, is a perfect example of that. So yeah, absolutely. As I said earlier, I think we're only at the start, and we're going to be seeing a lot of standards set, standards driven, and a lot of new brands and developing brands as the years go by.
Nick, do you deal a lot with existing campground owners around North America that are looking to expand into that? And how does that all fit together when you've got traditional tenting and traditional RVing, and maybe even a little bit of deluxe camping going on in structures? And all of a sudden they kind of want to break out and have a whole thing. Do the customer bases fit together well?
Yeah, so it's less. It's something we've dealt with a little less at Glampitect, just because they existing campgrounds probably will by nature have fewer zoning issues and permitting issues than say someone developing on raw land. So they kind of need our help a little bit less generally. But at EJH, where we sell the glamping structures, we've literally just put up I think 5 or 6 structures 20 minutes down the road from us, or just outside Edmington, on an existing campground, Half Moon Lake, and that's a mixture of camping, RVs, and as I say, this summer they've just added glamping. So certainly that there is definitely demand from existing campgrounds. It gives the campground owners will be able to charge a higher nightly rate for those luxury glamping units as opposed to a camping site. One thing I would say is that in general, I don't have the hard data to back this up, but based on observation and just sort of logic, I suppose, I think that the achievable nightly rate for a campground putting a luxury glamping unit on versus a bespoke glamping site, I think that the former would probably wouldn't be able to charge a high nightly rate as the bespoke glamping site, just because I think if you're looking to create that sort of true luxury private experience, I think that's maybe affected a little bit by if there's 100 camping sites and 100 RV spots on the same park versus just 6 pure glamping units surrounded by acres. But that absolutely does not mean that buying a glamping unit, if you're an existing campground or RV park, is a bad investment. As I say, we see it a lot. It definitely allows them to charge a higher nightly rate. It's just maybe compared to a pure glamping site, you maybe just have to temper your expectations a little bit. But again, you could still comfortably charge over $100 a night, maybe over $200 a night if you put a nice glamping unit on a campground, presuming the market is right and everything like that.
Yeah. So when I know you mentioned zoning earlier, and you mentioned it here just a little bit ago, zoning's never easy. Mm-hmm. Even for like new RV parks, campgrounds, it's difficult. I know on the glamping side, we seem to see, officials kind of concerned about the permanency of the structures. Is that something that you hear a lot of? How do you tackle that from a zoning perspective? How do you get in front of these officials and say, these are tents, are they able to take them down if there's weather events, different things like that?
So the answer, as it always is with these sort of questions, is it depends. Zoning is almost always done on a county by county basis, and obviously city by city as well. But generally, when we're talking glamping, they're out in the rural areas, so it's generally in the county jurisdiction. And so the answer will always vary depending on which specific jurisdiction we're speaking of. But in general, there's a whole lot of confusion. No one really knows. There's no standard set or anything like that. For example, we were looking at putting some of the EJH glamping units in a place just outside of Charleston. And they would have had to be built to not only residential standard building code, but also to meet hurricane code. So they would have needed to meet 140-mile-an-hour wind speeds.
Yeah.
Which any canvas structure is. I don't think there's any canvas structure in the world that's going to meet those wind speeds. And so, we were saying, okay, is there a workaround here? Maybe we take the structures down during hurricane season or whatever, and they wanted the project to happen, but the way they applied the rules, they just wouldn't budge. So they said if they were up for one day, they need to meet building code, and you wouldn't be able to take them down at all. That's one county. That's the extreme end of the spectrum. There's others that some counties don't even have building code and they just don't care, which is good for the developer's point of view. And then generally, somewhere in the middle where, you may need to meet some kind of building codes, or, maybe, you don't need to meet building codes if it's temporary, but it really does vary. I think last time we were at the glamping show, Ruben Martinez at the American Glamping Association mentioned something about, maybe trying to sort of lead a movement to try and get some kind of clarity. I don't know how that's sort of developing, but for now, it's a bit of a wild west out there, and that's another reason to do your zoning and permitting due diligence. Is if you can find a county that has no zoning and no building code, then your development process is far easier. But obviously you do have to take into account the market as well and make sure there's enough demand. But we'd always sort of recommend trying to find somewhere where the development process is going to be easier, and you can only know that through doing the research.
So Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting on that front, though, too, because there are counties where these projects will go to, and they realize, we don't have any zoning. And then all of a sudden you get slapped with a moratorium, which I think there's a couple of communities in Maine. There's actually a project up in Maine where they want to get going, and they're like, we don't have any zoning. 180-day moratorium. You can't do anything for 180 days. So that's been kind of interesting to watch, too. So
and I'm speaking with a client at the minute who's in that exact position, and one thing I would say to that is 180 days doesn't mean 180 days, because they'll more than likely extend that. I think the client I was speaking to, I think it maybe started as a 6-month moratorium and it's been 2 years basically. So I would certainly say, if you don't have land and you're looking for land and there's a place that's put a moratorium on, I would probably recommend just looking elsewhere and trying to find something else, just because it could be a nightmare. And
I've seen them come out of the moratoriums with really strict zoning rules too. There was one that just came out and they had some really strict zoning rules. So it's like, well, you waited for the moratorium, but now you still can't do anything because their new zoning rules aren't going to let you do anything. So it's like, it
can be a nightmare. It can be, and a lot of the times, I understand, planning departments are just trying to do their job and look after their communities, but sometimes I think it swings too far, and they just don't care about the people that want to sort of develop something that's going to bring economic benefits to the community, and they'll happily just we'll sort it later, and that's how you get a moratorium that starts at 6 months and is still there 2 years later, just because there's very little urgency to introduce these rules. And let's be honest, it's more work for them. They probably, bureaucracy and people being people, they probably don't want to add a load of extra work to their plate, so they're kind of happy just passing it off and delaying a little bit.
Nick, what's the lag time once a owner decides he wants to have a pod, for instance? What's the lag time between ordering and delivery? Typically?
I mean, it depends on the manufacturer. So at EJH, for example, we have 2 different European manufacturers. So you obviously have to account for shipping time. Our structures are pretty high end, so they obviously take some time to manufacture, more than just like a basic belt end. But at one of our manufacturers, Deward, we can get them from built and shipped from the Netherlands to Canada in 4 to 6 weeks. And that's because the WAD is it's just turned 75 years old, is got quite a lot of manufacturing capacity, whereas a lot of manufacturers in the industry, just because the industry is so new, just don't have that capacity. So, for example, in the UK, sorry to keep bringing it back to the UK, but it's kind of a good example of a place that there's a lot of comparisons to be drawn. Glamping pods have become more the rage in the last 5 years. 5 years ago, basically didn't exist. Now they're everywhere, and a lot of manufacturers kind of, I don't want to use the term got lucky, but they were just there at the right time, are able to build a nice looking timber structure, and have somehow managed to make millions, but they're still sort of catching up and adding to their manufacturing capabilities, and there isn't that big venture money or big funding money in the UK, or certainly it's not as readily available. So you can be looking at 6 months for a glamping pod in the UK just because the sort of capacity isn't there. And it's not a million miles off with some other structures in the US as well, just because the industry is so new and the manufacturers maybe are struggling to sort of keep up with the demand. But again, it will get there. Again, there'll be more money being put into the space, and I imagine the lead times will eventually sort of settle down a little bit.
So are you looking for manufacturers in North America to handle that load?
Well, so at EJH, I think we're very happy with our manufacturers in Europe. We're a distributor rather than a manufacturer. So I can't speak for us, but I'm sure there is a lot of room for other manufacturers. I'm still very surprised that glamping pods haven't made an appearance in the US. I think there's one company maybe in Canada that does them, but they're certainly haven't captured a huge portion of the market. So I'd be interested in seeing whether something that is so in demand in the UK, whether that ever catches on over here. I don't know. They are, again, probably maybe a little small for US tastes, but we'll see. I'm sure there's going to be lots of innovations, and it'd be remiss of me not to mention the tubo structures that EJH distribute. They're a great example of sort of an innovative structure that is, they're like a long cylindrical tube that you won't see anywhere else. So I'm sure there's going to be more innovations like that coming. So again, we're only at the very start, so I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah. Well, Nick, we have to get going here. I know you're busy, I'm busy, we're all busy, but it was great seeing you, Nick, and just hearing from you. I'd also mention, Woodall's Campground Magazine just came out with a look at the unique accommodation sector and the park model sector in our September issue. So anybody can go to woodallcm.com and see a digital edition of that magazine. And we do talk about, the build times, and we explore a bunch of different units. So that maybe would be helpful too to developers or park owners out there looking to get another unit. But thanks, Nick, for coming on. It's always great to see you, and I imagine I'll be seeing you at the glamping show here in another month.
Yes, you will be, and I can't believe it's only a month away already. It's scary.
I know.
But yeah, I look forward to seeing you.
Yeah, so I'm excited about the glamping show, and I look forward to seeing you in person. And thanks, everyone, for watching this week. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to WCM's Park Update, a production of Woodall's Campground Magazine. Join us for a new show each Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern on Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn for daily news and updates, and subscribe to our news feed on our website at woodallscm.com. Show hosts are Ben Quiggle and Mike Gast. Executive producers Rick Kessler and Alex Burkett. Copyright 2022, G&G Media Group.